Hello everybody and welcome to my latest political ideas video. So this is aimed at A-level politics and the political ideas section, which is part of both component 1 and component 2. Today we're looking at part of component 2 and our non-core ideology, which is nationalism. And I'm going to be talking about nationalism and the economy. Now, one of the interesting bits on this is there isn't an easy answer to what does nationalism think about the economy. So whilst with some of the other ideologies we looked at, so for example liberalism, you talk about, well, classical liberalism is linked with the free market economics, and modern liberalism is linked with Keynesian economics, and socialism is combined with connected to state-run industry and welfare states and redistribution of wealth. And conservatism, traditionally in one nation, conservatism is a kind of reluctant supporter of capitalism and then fully embraces it under the new right. With nationalism, it's difficult to pin it down, and we're going to see bits from all extremes of economic policy and bits in the middle as well. And so it's quite a confusing picture. Now, I'm hoping I'm going to be able to guide you through this slightly confusing picture, and we're going to start off with the premise, well, maybe there is no clear link between nationalism and any particular economic system or particular set of economic policies. There are some bits that I think are quite strongly in common through most of it, in terms of the idea of a nation state's economy being kind of protected and looked after and being separate from others. But that is not the case for all forms of nationalism, and liberal nationalists in particular. So nationalism can be seen as being compatible with both capitalism in extreme forms and moderate forms, and it can be seen as compatible with socialism. Nationalist ideas have been linked to economic policies in totalitarian regimes, but also nationalistic ideas have been associated with economic policy in democratic states. So liberal nationalists assume that economic cooperation between nation states is a good idea, and it will lead to prosperity of all the different nation states, and therefore embraces free market economics. Whilst there are other nationalists who seek to protect their economy from other countries and to achieve autarky or self-sufficiency. So there isn't a clear answer, and therefore we're going to have a look at some different aspects of nationalism, and different nationalists think about the economy in different ways. So, start off with, we're going to look at socialist nationalism. Now, the combining of nationalism and socialism was a key idea under Stalin in Russia, who looked to establish socialism in one country rather than looking at world revolution, which was proposed by his competitor Trotsky. And what it does is it places the defence of socialism as a key for the economic policy in that country, and it sees it as an idea of defending it against international capitalism, which is seen as a threat. And therefore it starts to become part of national identity, and an identity in a really positive way, as opposed to often international capitalism, which is then associated with things that make it seen in a very negative way. A good example of this is socialist nationalism took hold in a number of African states. One of the most extreme examples of this is under Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe. And what he did is he associated socialism within Zimbabwe as part of post-colonialism and independence, whilst associating capitalism with imperialism and dominance by foreign powers. In Cuba, Fidel Castro took great pride in socialism and tried to imbue this through Cuban society, and so supporting socialism was part of supporting Cuba. So part of supporting socialism was seen as really patriotic, while supporting what was often referred to as American capitalism was seen as being unpatriotic or treason. We similar even more extreme versions of this in North Korea. So where the identity of the state is very much wrapped up in the economic ideology of socialism, and then any criticism of that system is seen as being unpatriotic and going against the state and the ideals of your country. Not all socialists, however, like nationalism. In fact, most socialists don't. Socialist Internationalist view is very much that we see the problems of capitalism on a big scale in between nation states, and what happens is the strong economic nations exploit the weaker economic nations, just like capitalists exploit workers in the socialist view, and this leads to colonialism. Then building their empires and taking their spoils from their colonies, what happens is the workers of the strong economies are kind of bought off with these spoils that are made from exploiting the other countries. And this then breaks down the affinity that socialists say the workers should naturally have with workers elsewhere, rather than having affinity with the capitalists within their own state. So they see nationalism really as a real problem and something that should be removed. So therefore we've seen socialists who are in favour of nationalism, and here we've got socialists who are very much against it. So one of our next groups we're going to look at is nativists. Now nativists believe that there's an original group, often but not always the indigenous group. So America's a good example where the nativists are not part of the indigenous group. They're not part of the Native Americans. They are from what we refer to as the WASPs, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, from the early group of Northwest European immigration into the States from hundreds of years ago. And what they say is that there's a particular group that has a greater claim on nationality than the more recently arrived group. So their definition of nationalism has got a lot to do with kind of the identity and the culture, and often has got some racial elements in it as well. And this leads to the idea that this original or nativist group should have economic priority. So they should get priority for jobs, they should get priority for benefits, they should get priority for public services like education or health or housing. And it often manifests itself in demands for reductions in immigration. And you will see this, for example, in American politics, where you'll see parties taking a kind of a nativist line on this. You'll see it in the UK, you'll see it in countries such as France and Germany as well, where there will be parties or groups who put across a kind of nativist idea that there are people taking up the jobs and the resources that should be given to other people. You'll see this particularly in the kind of right-wing press in the UK, for example. Now, nativists also look to put up trade barriers and to use tariffs, which are import taxes, to protect their home industry against competition from abroad. So you're trying to keep your car industry protected from cheaper imports from elsewhere in the world. Your clothing industry, keep it producing clothes rather than importing cheaper ones from abroad. Or again, it might be agriculture, trying to protect that. Now, it is very much a regressive form of kind of ultra-conservative nationalism. The best current example is Donald Trump in America. And if we just look at some of the phrases and things that he says, it links very closely with his ideas of nativism and protectionism. So he talks about making America great again. So this is this kind of regressive idea that there was an ideal of America in the past, how it used to be, and that things have slipped and gone away from that. He talks about America first, which is this idea of protecting American industry and American jobs against foreign competition. We've seen that with kind of trade wars and huge tariffs put on foreign goods going in. And obviously with immigration, most famously his big promise was building this wall that he was obsessed with. And again, he's taken very kind of strong anti-immigration stance. So nativism we can see take hold in modern day democracies. Now, in its more extreme forms, we can see this kind of connecting to kind of chauvinistic nationalism and ideas of autarky. So when we talk about chauvinistic nationalism, we're talking about these extremely nationalistic totalitarian regimes with their belief about their superiority of their particular national group or nation. And they tend to concentrate very much on becoming economically self-sufficient. This is called autarky, because they're not wanting to be economically reliant on other countries, because they believe other countries are a threat to them, or other countries are against them. So this in particular, for example, in Nazi Germany. And they tend to then come up with all kinds of weird and wonderful ways, and they try to maybe artificially produce natural products which they don't have the resources to, and also it tends to lead them to become militaristic and expansionistic as they look to take economic resources of other nations which they think they need for themselves. And we see this with Nazi expansionism. They also have extreme nativist policies, and again, so for example, this would be in Nazi Germany, economic preference was very much given to Aryan Germans, and very much to the detriment of minority groups such as the Jews, where businesses were taken off Jewish people and given to Aryan business people, where homes were taken off people, where possessions were stolen off people. Where you were getting medals for one group for having lots of children and huge state benefits to go with it, whilst other groups were being sterilised and prevented from having children. So in its really extreme form, we can see it as nativist, protectionist types ideas associated with real chauvinistic, extreme right-wing nationalism. Right, so as we've gone through this, we've seen kind of huge variation. So we've got socialist nationalists, but then we've got socialists who are very much opposed to anything to do with nationalism and say that it is incompatible completely. We see liberal nationalists who want all nation states to cooperate, and they believe that free trade between nations is going to lead to everybody getting better off and spread wealth. Whilst then we've got the nativists who want to protect their own industry and want to protect groups within their own nation economically, and therefore are excluding others and excluding work with other nations, and then in most extreme forms this turns them into becoming expansionistic, where they look to exploit the resources in other nations for their own good. So there are some themes in there, but really there is not a single answer to what would a nationalist's economy look like, and you have to bear in mind we've got all these different types. Right, I hope that's been useful for you and given you some food for thought and debate and investigation into that. Please remember to like the video, please subscribe and leave me some comments. So this is, as I said at the beginning, it's part of my political ideas playlist. It's all aimed at A-level politics. There's an A-level politics playlist as well, and then you should be able to get everything you need, hopefully, from these videos to help you with your studies. Thank you very much for watching. I'll speak to you all again soon.